Hi everyone, I'm here to present on navigating new horizons, social emotional learning for recently arrived English learners. Before I proceed with the presentation proper, I'd like to give a quick introduction to myself and my partner. We are both very passionate about supporting diverse learners, and so we started our educational consultancy business that is going to be supporting those that work with diverse learners. So my name is Kimberly Delara Staunton. My partner's name is Safia Salam. Both of us work as ESL instructional advisors for Memphis Shelby County Schools in Memphis, Tennessee. I'll hang back for a few seconds on this slide so you can glance on our specialty areas. Okay, let's move on. So, why did we start Bridges to Belonging LLC? These photos capture our story. Sophia and myself met at a local elementary school as ESL teachers. We quickly began to see that our students and families, many of them who were recently arrived English learners, required support beyond the traditional classroom supports they were receiving. These, coupled with their needs during the COVID pandemic, became very evident to us, and it just showed how they needed more to thrive and belong in our school. As you can see in our pictures, our students are engaged in activities that not only make learning enjoyable, but learning that's grounded in real world experiences. Sophia and I have always subscribed to the belief that meaningful learning extends beyond the classroom. It's about sustaining curiosity, relevance, and connection. Through our years of working together, we've strived to create equitable spaces for our diverse learners by leveraging not only their existing knowledge and skills, but also their voices, identities, and lived experiences. Our goal has always been to foster learning environments where every student feels seen, valued, and empowered to succeed. In a nutshell, our company partners with schools and organizations to design research and evidence based strategies that ensure every diverse learner feels a strong sense of belonging the moment they enter their learning environment. Our goal is to support students in becoming not only college and career ready, but also confident, empowered individuals who thrive well beyond the walls of the classroom. So, you may ask, who do we serve? Our umbrella of services is wide. We partner with schools, educators, families, nonprofits, and a wide range of learning communities. At the heart of our work is a deep commitment to advocating for diverse learners. Our mission is to ensure that this often underrepresented group of students feels empowered, engaged, valued, and seen. We collaborate with you to implement equity based strategies tailored to your context, and we are confident that the diverse learners in your schools and their families will experience a true sense of belonging. So I'll just allow you to review the overview of our services. So we not only work with the K-12 population, but we also support higher ed and adult learners. Okay, so now back to our presentation for today. Here is our agenda. We're first going to talk about statistics, who are multilingual learners, different challenges for recently arrived English learners, social emotional learning practices, serving the recently arrived English learner community and their families, and we're going to close out with a reflection piece. These are our objectives. As you can see, we hope that you will leave this session with an increased background knowledge of social emotional learning. Add some activities to your toolbox to take back to your schools and districts, as well as share some takeaways with your groups as thought leaders. Let's go ahead and get started with some statistics on mental health, suicide, and more. On this slide, you will see the 13 states with the lowest rate of mental illness among their youth as of 2024. These states also provide higher rates of access to mental health care for their young population. So that's something to consider. We will note on this slide that Tennessee ranks 46 out of 50. I'd like to invite you all to ponder on why this might be as we move on through this presentation. Now let's go ahead and take a look at where Tennessee youth ranks on our youth having at least one major depressive issue. What do you all notice about the percentage compared to the national average? It's about the same, just a little bit high, isn't it? As a study conducted by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, in 2023 showed how 40% of high school students felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for at least 2 weeks in a row that caused them to stop doing their usual activities. Their study shows that female students were more likely than male students to experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. LGBTQ plus students were even more likely than heterosexual students to experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. In fact, the CDC states that young people in the US are collectively experiencing a level of distress that calls on all of us to act. They also emphasize how even if the primary goal of schools is academic learning, schools play a very crucial role in shaping mental, physical, and social growth. Nearly all indicators of poor mental health and suicidal thoughts and behaviors worsened since 2013. If we look at the table on the left from CDC, you will notice that youth who are from racial and ethnic minority groups, those who experience racism, and those who identify as LGBTQ+, that group of youth, those groups of youth often feel less connected at school. It's highly recommended for schools to improve students' sense of connectedness, starting with social emotional learning programs in the early learning or early grades and youth development programs in middle and high school. The table on the right shows Tennessee's 2024 ranking in the percentage of youth experiencing thoughts of suicide. Again, the Tennessee rate is higher than the national average. And again, it's not by much. But when you look at the numbers, it's still very concerning. Now, let's get away from the doom and gloom talk and take a look at the bright side. Let's notice our Tennessee youth ranking compared to the national average on the Flourishing Report of 2024. So, flourishing is determined as a positive indicator of mental health and well being by the Health Resources and Services Administration, or HRSA. So, they have a maternal and child health bureau. That's what they define flourishing as. The criteria for flourishing were designed to assess students or children's learning, resilience, and self regulation. The youth who were flourishing were those who always or usually showed interest and curiosity in learning new things. They worked to finish tasks they started, and they stayed calm and control when they are faced with a challenge. So I invite you all to ponder on how you, as an educator, can help get Tennessee's flourishing rate up as we work to decrease the number of mental health illnesses in the state. Let's look at some of the root causes of stress for our recently arrived else. But before we proceed with that, let's define who are multilingual learners or who are recently arrived else. Multilingual learners or MLs are students whose parent or guardian report speaking one or more languages other than English at their home. MLs may or may not qualify for English language support, depending on their level of English proficiency. So, according to the National Center on Education Statistics, or NCES, the percentage of multilingual learners increased overall between the fall of 2011 to the fall of 2021, from 4.6 million students in 2011 to 10.6 million in 2021. So that's a very big jump. So it means that as of 2021, there are now 5.3 million MLs in the school system. That was just over 4 years ago, or almost 4 years ago. And several indicators show that the trend is growing, trending, it's trending up, and it's going to continue to do so. Regardless of their reason for migrating, immigrant students bring cognitive and social emotional assets to the classroom that contribute to and even provide advantages in language, academic, and psychological growth. This is now information from the National Center on Immigration Integration Policy. National Center on Immigrant Integration Policy. So now, the first step to take to support our recently arrived ELs is to recognize their needs and then developing strategies to meet them where they are so that they can thrive both socially and emotionally and achieve academic success. Now, let's discuss some unique challenges our recently arrived ELs face. Acculturative stress is a phenomenon that can occur to immigrants as they acclimate themselves to a new culture. Our students are particularly vulnerable to this because oftentimes it was not their choice to relocate to America. Although acculturative stress is a normal part of the adjustment or relocation process, educators need to be aware that our students may be affected by this and ensure that the effects of acculturative stress is mitigated through social emotional learning activities. Here are some of the symptoms of acculturative stress. These symptoms can manifest through behaviors such as disruptive classroom behavior, withdrawal, maybe confusion, and a refusal to attempt to participate in the classroom. Again, as educators, please take note of any of the recently arrived ELs experiencing these symptoms so that you are able to address them and help ease your students' stress. Another outcome of immigration is migratory grief. It is a profound sense of loss and longing for everything your student is familiar with, like any kind of loss or grief that we experience, right? In addition, migratory grief can be similar to the sense of grief one feels at the loss of a loved one. Therefore, schools should proactively monitor students who may experience these feelings. Just like with acculturative stress, students experience observable symptoms of migratory grief. Some ways to help them navigate these feelings are to create routines, integrating SEL, and establishing a welcoming and inclusive classroom space for your students. I'd like to focus on those hyper mature children. These are the children or students or youth that are having to take over responsibilities that are normally associated with adults, such as having to translate for their parents when they have to be at the parent teacher conferences, maybe at the doctor's office, As adults, it's important to keep in mind that students are not spokespeople for entire culture. They do have a perspective to share their own personal experiences, but having to ask them to be a translate interpreter is a lot for them, even if they're in high school or not as young as elementary age students. In this next part of our presentation, we will explore ways that we can integrate SEL practices in our classrooms to better serve our recently arrived ELs. So, effective integration of SEL practices into our classroom and school environments helps students thrive individually and academically. CASEL is an international organization dedicated to SEL best practices. They have identified five core competencies as the foundation for SEL. These are self awareness, self management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. That QR code will lead you to a resource that support recently arrived ELs and reflect the five core competencies from CASEL. So I invite you to scan that code. So, what's SEL for recently arrived ELs? According to Valentina Gonzalez, she's one of the leading experts on supporting ELs, stress affects thinking and learning. So, including specific targeted SEL practices for recently arrived ELs in your classrooms and schools will help to lower their affective filter and provide a means for them to feel more integrated and comfortable in the educational settings. These will ultimately lead to the ability to focus on their learning. So, affective filter is a term coined by Stephen Krashen. It just means that when somebody is highly stressed, their affective filter is really high. So, that really needs to be turned down or lowered in ways that make somebody or your students or youth feel safe in your classroom. When we target the unique needs of recently arrived ELs, it leads to better learning outcomes for them long term. Including SEL is easier than you would think, and it's a natural outgrowth of creating a welcoming classroom environment. Some ways to include SEL for recently arrived ELs in your classroom include building relationships with your students, learning about the backgrounds and experiences of your students without stereotyping or generalizing their experiences. Another way is to explicitly teach and practice vocabulary words to articulate feelings such as I feel sad, happy, nervous, or I am feeling whatever they're feeling, because to allowing giving them that vocabulary to express themselves is also very powerful. Using ESL best practices in instruction such as pre-teaching vocabulary and concepts and using scaffolding like visuals can also be very important in the same way as utilizing cognates to help them make connections to their language. Now let's shift and discuss how to serve recently arrived ELs and their families, because we know as educators that students thrive best when their families thrive alongside them. It is very essential that schools create a welcoming environment from the moment families enter the school doors. As the saying goes, the first impression is the last impression. Therefore, all school staff who interact with students should be trained on best practices for supporting immigrant families. Once again, schools play a vital role in welcoming families, and they can help empower them through communication, explanation of legal rights, social emotional support, and community resources. Let's explore each of these further in the upcoming slides. Communication is the foundational bridge upon which schools can build connections with families. Therefore, school teams should identify families' preferred language of communication and strive to use resources such as bilingual staff, contracted interpreters, or maybe language line. And that's what we use in our district to communicate with families. Schools should do their utmost to use professional interpreters because children may language or the ability to serve as the communication liaison for their families. We've mentioned this earlier as well. It creates hypermature children. Not only does this burden the students to perform a task that they are not trained for, but it leads to a lot of miscommunication when words are poorly or erroneously interpreted. Schools have an obligation to explain families' legal rights to them. This includes providing information regarding the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act, special education services through IDEA, and ESL services, which majority of our ESL teachers already do. It's part of their job responsibilities as ESL teachers. Families themselves can benefit from SEL. Schools and districts should place the following practices on project level, ensuring that they are applied in all educational settings. So these could include creating a welcoming environment. We could not overemphasize that. Needs to start at the front office, to the cafeteria, maybe having parent support groups, posting relevant signage in languages most spoken at the school, organizing parent teacher meetings, having those interpreters for parents who need them at those meetings, allowing opportunities for cultural exchange, such as a diversity night, maybe celebrating and spotlighting religious holidays, not just Christmas, and stocking those classrooms and libraries with literature from a variety of home languages, celebrating Heritage Month such as AAPI, Hispanic Heritage Month, and Arab American Heritage Month. That's a lot. You don't have to do all of that, but those are just some great, wonderful, evidence-based ideas. Of course, there's only so much a school itself can provide in the way of supports, right? There's other subgroups in the school. So having all these, knowing that they're available, is really, really important and impactful. Schools will need to compile and share a list of local resources available for families. Maybe include a list of therapists, trauma providers, churches, and local nonprofits who will be more than happy to support the families of these students. Finally, schools can invite available community partners to better support their parents and families. This can be done through inviting nonprofits to meet with parents, partnering with community organizations such as refugee centers, adult education providers, legal services, and ethnic heritage organizations. There is a lot out there. Many of them have grants and funding to support this type of work, but it is the job of educators to reach out to them to learn more about their programs. In addition, it's important to train your school staff so they are familiar with and can speak about the community resources when parents come through those school doors. Now, let's shift to think about how we can apply all of this into our learning environments. Okay? After all of that presentation, all those slides, the additional social emotional learning support guide for our English learners, I invite you to take a few minutes and ponder upon which ESL strategy you plan to use with your multilingual learners, your MLs in your classroom. And maybe which one you already are using and are effective. Here is the QR code again for those additional resources that we touched on. that you can add to your toolbox. We'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear how you are supporting your diverse learners, your recently arrived English learners, your newcomers in your classroom. Thank you for being here, for listening to our presentation, or watching this recording. Here is our contact. Here are our contact details. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to connect. We'd love to learn from each other. So please, we invite you to reach out to us. Again, we are an education consultancy focused on helping diverse learners in a variety of settings. We work collaboratively with you with whatever needs you may have regarding this student population. This includes the micro level of standards alignment and instructional practices, differentiation of instruction to trainings on culturally responsive and trauma-informed practices. We help to design social emotional learning integration into your organization, and we work alongside you to design meaningful assessments and timely feedback practices. Most importantly, our services are tailored and customizable to the specific needs of your organization. Thank you, and we look forward to hearing from you all soon.